Hello, everyone. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. I'm just checking the settings to make sure people can let themselves in. Oh, perfect. Everything's working like clockwork. What an absolute treat. Very rarely happens on a Friday. Um, yeah, brilliant. Fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, everyone so much for being here for I can't believe I'm saying it, like the last free webinar of 2024. This year has absolutely flown by. So yeah, thank you everyone for being here. Today's session is a very kind of tip of the iceberg introduction to this topic of self-compassion. And do you know what, actually, it feels like this has come at a really poignant time because everyone we've been engaging with and working with and speaking to this week has reported, whether from themselves, the people around them, that people are just at the point now that we are quite worn out and run down and just exhausted. And this time of year is quite an important time of year. Obviously, there's the festive season coming up, which people may or may not be celebrating. Um, that in and of itself can be really challenging, and how your relationships look, the societal expectations that come with what you shouldn't be doing, who you shouldn't be spending time with, how much you should or shouldn't be spending, for example, actually can be a very overwhelming, challenging, deeply painful time of the year, actually, for many people. And actually, for those of us who might be prone to self-criticism, we might see an increase at the moment. And also, not even just thinking about this time of year, it's a time of year for reflection. Often people are looking back at their year that you've had and thinking about what hasn't happened, goals that we may or may not have reached, how our life has changed, maybe in ways that we didn't expect, reflecting on our health, our mental health, our relationships, and also looking forward to what we want to think about next year. And so again, unfortunately, this time of year can really feed any self-criticism. So like I said, actually, it feels like this has come at quite a hopefully useful time. And yeah, like we said, it is very much in an overview, an introduction to this topic. We could go on about this topic for hours. And there's all sorts of stuff. I mean, we'll send you a couple of resources as well in the chat later. But yeah, hopefully still somewhat useful. And thank you all, first of all, for in the midst of this very overwhelming, exhausting, busy time, for making the time for yourselves, first and foremost. And hopefully, even if you've brought nothing but a bit of curiosity to today's session, that's more than we could ask for and hope for. So thank you for being here, genuinely. So for anyone who's not familiar with us, just so that you know who we are, so my name's Hayley. I'm one of the trainers at PMAC. I do all of these free webinars. And essentially at PMAC, we specialise in like bespoke trainings for businesses and workplaces. So yeah, there's our details. But like I said, today I want to crack on and really think about what this term self-compassion actually is. There's lots of misconceptions around what it means to be self-compassionate, and actually the reality is practicing self-compassion can be very difficult and actually very painful. It's not easy to do, particularly if your automatic thoughts tend to be very critical in nature, particularly when we're thinking about ourselves. And then also thinking towards the end of the session about, strategies to improve, start to practice self-compassion, essentially. Bearing in mind, again, just that the nature of the challenges that come with December, this isn't supposed to be another tool to use to criticize yourselves if you feel like, I don't have time for this, I don't have the headspace to think about this, I'm not very good at this. But we might come away with a slightly better understanding about why we think about, ourselves and our abilities in that way, essentially. So, as always, we like to make these sessions at least a little bit interactive. I think personally, actually a lot of the benefit comes from hearing other people's perspectives and sharing of ideas and sharing of minds and normalizing all of this sort of stuff. So a box hopefully has popped up on people's screens. This is a word cloud, which if you engage with a response here. It will be anonymous. You can also engage through the chat. You are more than welcome to engage however you like. But is there anything, first of all, that comes to mind for people when we're just thinking about this term self-compassion, what it is, what it isn't, what it feels like? You can't get this wrong. Just what springs to mind for people? And you know what? Some brilliant responses now already. I love this topic so much. So kindness to self is coming up a few times. Loving yourself, like a warm hug, this sense of a warm hug, or maybe actually giving yourself a hug, taking time for me, being patient with myself, engaging with self-care. Oh, I really love all this stuff. Giving myself grace when I don't feel at my best, talking to ourselves like we would talk to our loved ones, positivity towards yourself, how you look, things you've done. And yeah, I love that. Think about how you look. So we can use like movement as well as a tool for self-compassion. We're always talking about movement, you know, for mood, for emotional health, not just as a tool to contort your body shape, for example. And also it can be a tool, like I said, to develop self-compassion. And again, actually this time of year, often where people are more likely to indulge, we can have self-compassion for ourselves, and maybe the way that our body shape changes potentially as a result of doing things that have brought us joy and yeah, a sense of calm, safety, relaxation. So yeah, that's such an important point. Not being so critical with our self-talk, looking after yourself, being compassionate, kind towards yourself, how you treat yourself. Oh, I love this response as well. Not putting yourself on a lower pedestal than you would put others. Yeah, and absolutely. We often see with self-criticism, people hold themselves to unfair and unrealistic standards that they would never reasonably expect of anybody else. Oh, I love this one word: chocolate. Say no more. Job done. I think we all feel you. Self-caring, saying no. Yes, absolutely. We're going to talk about the importance of actions as well. So not just like, you know, self-compassion in our talk, but through our actions. And actually self-compassion isn't just about being really nice all the time, but doing things to alleviate our suffering and to prevent future suffering. And sometimes that means actually doing things that are very difficult in the moment, like setting boundaries, like removing yourself from unhelpful relationships, like staying away from, you know, again, this time of year, family members that will actually cause you harm emotionally, psychologically, for example, and doing those things to prevent your potential future suffering. So actually, I love that response about saying no. But yeah, lots and lots of stuff coming up there about kindness, which is brilliant. Thank you, everybody. So when we're thinking about compassion, psychologically, we define compassion as like a sensitivity to the suffering of yourself as well as other people. And this is important because often we are brilliant at, you know, being compassionate towards other people, and we don't extend that same response and, you know, thoughtfulness, behavior towards ourselves. Importantly, though, like I said, with this commitment to try and alleviate suffering or to prevent it. So like I said, it's not just avoiding everything all the time because I don't want to feel that way, and I'm just going to be so kind to myself that I never get anything done anymore, which, you know, is something that we often hear in therapy. It's a real misconception. But this sensitivity to the pain that is there without, as somebody mentioned, kind of minimizing it, dismissing it, putting it as, you know, less worthy, less relevant, less important than anybody else's pain or suffering, but also with a commitment to try and alleviate and prevent it. So there are many definitions of self-compassion. This is quite a lengthy or in-depth version. The self-compassion is the process of turning that compassion inward. So we're kind and understanding rather than harshly self-critical when we fail, when we make mistakes, which is inevitable, or feel inadequate. And we give ourselves support and encouragement rather than being cold or judgmental when challenges and difficulties arise. And again, that's not to say that we don't instinctively at times maybe feel cold towards ourselves, judge ourselves, speak critically of ourselves. But again, what we want to move towards is recognizing that, and, you know, maybe even asking ourselves, like, what benefit is this serving at the moment? How will this help me? Is this going to help me? What if I try being more compassionate towards myself at this moment? What might that look like? What might that feel like? And so again, like I'm going to touch on in a moment, this can be very, very, very difficult for a number of reasons. And at the same time, the research tells us that self-compassion is one of the most powerful sources of coping that we have available, essentially, and it can radically improve our mental well-being, our physical well-being. And again, it actually motivates us to make changes, to do difficult things, but rather than coming from a place of doing those things to prove ourselves, to reach these unrealistic standards, to prove our value, we do these things because actually we're a human being who's doing our best, and we deserve to have a life that is as free from pain as we can possibly make it, and because we deserve to be happy. And this can be very difficult to do, partly because our brains are brilliant at prioritizing survival and safety and imagining all the things that could go wrong, reflecting on all the things that we think have gone wrong before. And then you add into the mix the fact that life is actually really difficult. Unfortunately, that means that we do all experience suffering for different reasons, to different extents, at different times. But fundamentally, every single one of us is doing the best that we can with the tools that we have at any given point. And self-compassion is just one more tool that can really, really help us, to overcome challenges, pain, when the unexpected does arise, unfortunately. But like I said, we need to be realistic. Like, this stuff actually isn't the easiest. It often doesn't come the most naturally to people. So just to take a moment here and kind of, just think about the reality of this. Why do we think this practice in self-compassion can actually be quite challenging for people? Why do we think that this could be difficult to practice, difficult to implement, might feel really uncomfortable, do we think? And brilliant, we get some fantastic responses in already. Thank you everyone so much. So we've got things in here like, because of perfectionism, because we want to feel negative sometimes. Yeah, maybe sometimes we do kind of lean into thoughts and feelings that are quite negative and aren't the most pleasant to experience. And also, it's okay, the fact that we are going to experience these at some point. Life is not feeling great all of the time. The aim in therapy isn't to just be happy all of the time. That's unrealistic. Because maybe of low self-esteem, low self-belief, we've got a critical inner voice, being vulnerable, feel like we're facing the truths in the situation, versus being overly optimistic or like toxic positivity. And again, like, realism and validating that, acknowledging the challenges that we're facing is really, really important. And actually just always looking for the positive can be unhelpful and cause more pain actually sometimes. So kind of that facing that truth can mean that the self-compassion element can be difficult. We might need to shift our mindset, the energy that's required because of expectations that maybe we put on ourselves, that we think other people hold for us, because of guilt, because we are conditioned to serve other people and prioritize other people. Guilt's coming up quite a lot here, because it feels selfish. We have high expectations, imposter syndrome. It's really hard to get out that mindset. The fact that we feel guilty, especially as women, the lack of energy. Oh, this is such an important point as well. The expectation that you have to be perfect all of the time, whether it's in work, on social media, because we are our harshest self-critics, because you don't believe in it, because it's hard to let others down. Absolutely. So some really, really, really brilliant and important points in there. And again, it is important to acknowledge the fact that self-compassion can be really difficult because it can feel really selfish. And often, as many people have said, you might be socialized to think about everybody else and pleasing everyone else, never upsetting anyone else. Self-criticism is often automatic. It happens so quickly and we just accept it. We don't, even recognize sometimes that there's an alternative way of thinking. Being self-critical can also feel motivating. For some people, they feel like they tell themselves how useless they're doing, that they should be doing better, that will be a driver, for example. People might fear being seen as arrogant or self-indulgent. Also, I think it's really important to acknowledge the fact that offering yourself self-compassion can actually unlock past pain and really draw light to times in your life that you needed compassion and you deserved compassion from other people, and maybe you didn't receive the compassion that you needed, essentially. So it can be very, very challenging. And also, at some point, self-criticism has been an adaptive or useful strategy, for example. So, we might think that self-criticizing will help us to undo bad things or get things done. We might worry that if we don't criticize ourselves, we won't, live up to other people's expectations of us, or the expectations that we have in ourselves, for example. So it can be very, very, very difficult to practice self-compassion. And there are many things that we can do to start to practice this and find what works for us. And so it is important, first of all, that we try to think about doing this gradually, and we don't use this as another tool to now beat ourselves with because we're not doing this well enough or we're not getting this right, for example. But it is important to do, and it can make a massive difference. So low self-compassion is generally very much associated, the research tells us, with much more intense levels of shame and self-loathing, and we're more likely to base our worth on the approval of other people. So we're more likely to people please, struggle with boundaries. We're more likely to have perfectionist tendencies, for example. We're more likely also, if we struggle with self-compassion, to feel lonely, to feel isolated. And importantly, we are social creatures. Humans are social creatures, and we need and deserve to feel valued, cared for, respected. We're more likely, if we struggle with self-compassion, to end up burnt out, with struggling with our mental health, for example. So the consequences are, you know, very, very real of struggling with self-compassion. And there are many benefits, again, to doing our best to try, whether it's we're going to feel better equipped and better able to cope with challenges. We're going to prioritize and, you know, really focus on trying to create some work-life separation to improve our work-life balance, because yes, I want to do well at work, and also I matter, and my life beyond just who I am at work matters. We're going to find that it's easier and we're more likely, even if it is really difficult, to communicate boundaries. It's also associated with improved levels of joy, creativity, feeling more optimistic, having a stronger, more stable sense of self-worth. So thinking about what self-compassion is, essentially there are three branches to this. There are common humanity, there's mindfulness, and there are self-kindness. So I'll briefly introduce you to these, and then we're thinking about how do we implement this, how do we use these things. So the three branches. So first of all, this common humanity is just understanding that we, again, are social creatures, and fundamentally we all do need to feel cared for and valued and protected and accepted. And unfortunately, we can't always rely on other people to meet that need. We can't guarantee that we're going to meet that need. This idea of unconditional love that we should all be receiving from family or from partners, unfortunately, is not the reality for many, many people. And so for many of us, we won't have had this sense that, you know, throughout your life, regardless of what you've done, how you've behaved, how you've performed, that you are still inherently worthy and worthwhile and accepted and valued and felt that you were cared for. So with that, you know, it comes the understanding that actually all of us will experience pain, suffering to different extents at different times, and just fundamentally the fact that we're all actually doing the best that we can at any point, and we all have limits, and that doesn't make you any lesser than anybody else. It doesn't mean that you're not coping as well as anyone else or as well as you should be. You've not got everything together in the way that you should be. It's just the fact that you, as much as anyone else, is a person, and we cannot do everything. Essentially, we have the mindfulness elements, so kind of being a bit more attuned to the present moment and what's actually going on, and recognizing when our brain is maybe engaging in more self-critical thoughts, and how if we run with it and pay loads of attention to it, that might increase. But also trying to fight thoughts and fight feelings and not experience them can also make them increase. So actually just accepting the moment as it is, to try and help us to gain a little bit more distance from these thoughts that, again, we kind of accept as just fact, and these feelings that come alongside them, and just trying to work towards being slightly less judgmental towards what we perceive as flaws, and less judgmental of the fact that we do experience painful emotions, essentially. And then the final element of this is this self-kindness, you know, that treating yourself with the grace, the respect, the understanding, the care that you would somebody else that you respect, care about, or a friend, for example. So we, through the way that we talk to ourselves, through our actions, the way that we behave, we work towards trying, like you said, trying as best as we can. We're not going to get this right all the time. It's not going to be perfect. And again, that's okay. But trying to work towards treating ourselves, like we said, with as though we're someone that matters, essentially. And what this all kind of contributes towards is becoming the person that we need in moments of overwhelm, feeling isolated, feeling not good enough, feeling scared. All of this stuff combined works towards us becoming someone that we can rely on, essentially, which increases the likelihood of us getting our needs met when we need to feel that sense that we matter, that we're cared for example. So how do we do this? First of all, everyone is going to have different ideas about what it means to treat ourselves well. Like I said, this is a brilliant tool for actually managing emotions, calming ourselves, looking after ourselves, making sure our needs get met. And what I would find useful, what I would do to be compassionate towards myself might sound horrendous to somebody else and really unrealistic, uncomfortable. And what works for one person here today might not work for somebody else. So the idea is that, you know, we're going to present some ideas in terms of what we can do. But this is not exhaustive. You can go away, find all sorts of stuff. We'll send you a couple of resources, like we said. But just understanding that not everything's going to work for you, and that's okay. And this is a process that is going to ebb and flow with practice, essentially. So even when we notice that we're trying these things and we think, you know, your inner critic tells you that you're not doing this well enough, you should be doing better at this. You know, self-compassion might mean that we say, do you know what, actually, I'm trying something different and it takes time to get good at anything. And I'm practicing something that is really difficult, because it is important to bear in mind the fact that we've learned to be very critical towards ourselves through, you know, maybe the way that other people around us spoke about themselves when we were younger, and we've kind of adopted that as a mentality, maybe because we've internalized criticism that's come from other people. It's difficult to practice, and you know, again, we can unlearn this. We can learn to kind of break this habit. And again, the benefits of this, whether it's with, you know, your work, your relationships, just your ability to manage your emotions when things happen, the benefits can be, or they can feel endless, quite frankly. So the first element just is remembering and holding in mind, and again, maybe this looks like setting notes, reminding yourself of this here and there, putting something on the screensaver on your phone, a quote that reminds you the fact that actually you are a person, a human who is under pressures internally from yourself, externally from your bosses, your managers, your family, your partners, your friends, and fundamentally you are doing your best. And just remembering that any emotions you're experiencing because our brains and our bodies have been evolved to experience that, and it's not a sign that you aren't good enough, that you can't cope, that you can't do anything, that you shouldn't be doing this. It's information versus confirmation, essentially. And also just recognizing in these moments where we do maybe minimize our experiences, dismiss our pain, that you also matter as much as anyone else. And even if we compare ourselves to other people and we think, well, they've got it so much harder, that doesn't mean that your challenges right now are any less valid. So just doing our best, like you said, whether it's setting reminders on our screensavers, emailing ourselves, setting reminders here and there throughout the week so that we literally see a notification, just reminding yourself you are doing your best, you are a person as much as anyone else, you are living with a brain that makes things quite tricky in a world that is very overwhelming, overstimulating, high pressure, fast paced, full of suffering. And it's not a reflection on you, essentially. So just bearing in mind that common humanity and trying to hold that in mind and keep reminding ourselves of that as much as possible. Because again, we can kind of forget it when our instinct is to criticize ourselves. We can try to start to incorporate a little bit more mindfulness into our day-to-day. So again, with mindfulness, we are thinking about being grounded to the present moment exactly as it is, not to suppress thoughts, get rid of thoughts, change the way that we feel, but just to recognize what's there, what thoughts our brains are automatically just presenting to you, to hopefully start to recognize that actually, you know, these thoughts that, you know, your brain will just continue to generate will also change, and they will move on, and we don't have to do anything with them, act on them, accept them, for example, so that we can start to just notice that, you know, this is just something that our brains do, again, versus then criticizing ourselves for having any sort of thoughts, criticizing ourselves for having any sorts of the feelings, for example, just to move towards being slightly more accepting of ourselves and our opinions about experiences. Of course, we have opinions about the things that happen to us and what that means about us, and that is okay. And trying not to judge ourselves for thinking anything. And there's lots and lots of forms of mindfulness that are using compassion focused therapy that use things like loving kindness meditations, compassion meditations, compassionate imagery, for example, but just any form of mindfulness in its purest form is enough. And there are many, many, many ways you can do this. You can just pay attention to the sensations, the taste, the textures, the temperature of things when you're eating or having a drink. You can pay attention to the sights, the sounds, the smells, how you feel in your body, the sounds of things crunching under your feet when you just go for a walk. And you can be mindful for a minute of that walk. You don't have to be doing this for 20 minutes a day, an hour a day. You can be mindful while you wash your hands and you just pay attention to how these things feel. You can pay attention to what's going on in your body. Again, if we are trying to commit to alleviating potential suffering as well, body scanning is a brilliant opportunity to check in with your body day to day, particularly if you are prone to overworking, very, very, very high, unrealistic expectations of yourselves. You might find that you work without taking a break, going to the toilet, having a drink, for example. So body scanning can be a good way of checking in and noting, am I actually neglecting myself here? How am I likely to feel this time in a few hours if my blood sugars crash, I feel weak, I've got a headache, I don't feel well? For example, paying attention to the environment. And again, you don't have to spend hours doing this. Even 30 seconds to a minute can make a difference. Rather than, when am I going to make time for mindfulness? Can I be mindful now, for example? And again, just really not underestimating the power of moments and mindful moments where we're not judging ourselves. Because again, a moment of self-compassion can change your day, but a string of these can start to change your life. And then we think about the self-kindness. So again, we can look at this from a couple of different angles, essentially. So we can look at treating ourselves with self-kindness through the way that we behave, through our actions. So that might look like, again, engaging with mindfulness practices. It can look like taking care of business, making sure that you eat, prioritizing getting some time outside today, moving your body, even though you don't want to right now, but you know that it's going to help to prevent that back pain flaring up if I do these stretches for 5 minutes a day. Communicating boundaries, and also self-soothing, which we're going to come back to in a moment. And then we can think about how we talk to ourselves. And, we maybe try to talk to ourselves in a slightly more balanced, respectful, understanding, compassionate way, by even on the days where everything felt like it went wrong, you recognize a few things that you did well, even if it was you stayed calm for slightly longer, you managed to walk away before you bit someone's head off, you managed to get that thing done, even if the other stuff didn't get done. You started lots and lots of tasks, and even though you didn't manage to finish them all, you made a start on things. And we can practice, kind of literally speaking to ourselves in a different way through things like journaling, through compassionate letter writing. Speaking of which, we have a couple of prompts that we will send to you in the chat now. So there's some journaling prompts, including some prompts to help develop self-compassion, and also something called compassionate letter writing, which I think is a brilliant tool to actually start to meet your needs. When you know that today has been hell on earth, you know that tomorrow you're likely to feel anxious coming into work, for example, you write a letter to yourself or email something to yourself, you voice note yourself, you write a text to yourself, telling yourself everything that actually would be helpful for you to hear and inspire you and give you a sense of safety, encouragement, for example. And then maybe we make a note, a reminder to read it, or maybe we email it ourselves. So the first thing you see tomorrow morning when you come in after a hellish day today is everything that you're going to need to hear to get you through that day. We start to become the person that we need and that we deserve, quite frankly. And we can also use, like briefly touched on there, like self-soothing. So this is an action that we can take. These are behaviors, things, activities that we can do to help create a sense of soothing, calm, safety. And again, this will look vastly different for everybody, but essentially is a tool that we actively use because we want to alleviate suffering and prevent future suffering. Essentially, that... Oh, I've just seen in the chat, the links aren't working for somebody. They're not able to download them. I'll try again in a moment. When the session's finished, I'll try again, work these out. If not, we can email them to people that have attended. But yeah, apologies for that. So yeah, so thinking about things that work for you. It can be having a bath. It can be taking a break from work. It can be reading, wrapping up in a blanket with some, a nice hot drink, spending time with your pets, spending time, I don't know, Engaging in sensory stimulation, looking at a lava lamp, aromatherapy, ASMR, treat yourself to a nice meal, having a massage. What we want to do here is just take a moment to share some ideas. Maybe you think about what used to bring me comfort. What do I think would bring me comfort, even if I've never had an experience of it yet? And again, just being open-minded, being curious, but actually taking action to try and offer yourself that, for example. So bubble bath is coming up a lot. Oh, I love this. My fluffy emotional support seahorse toy. I've been talking about seahorses a lot this week, very randomly. So yeah, very timely. Exercise, video games, a cup of tea. Yeah, and maybe you're getting your favorite tea bags. You keep them in work so that you can have a moment of self-soothing when you need it. Stroking a soft blanket, singing. I love this. Singing. We don't need anybody else to do anything, be anything for us to be able to sing to ourselves, for ourselves. Meditation, jigsaws, pets, going for a walk. Lego is really, really popular. Reading, and maybe actually as well, sharing Lego, borrowing books, again, can actually be a tool to strengthen our relationships potentially. Learning to be selfish and not feel guilty, then enjoying stuff I want to do. Yeah, so actually noticing, even if there are feelings of discomfort before we do these things, and doing them anyway. Those feelings will pass, and the benefits of doing these things because you matter, matters essentially. Looking at the sea, eating, Reiki, watching dog videos. I love that. Turtles. I don't know if that's looking at turtles, playing with turtles. Hot baths, cup of tea, journaling, meditation, being outside. This is brilliant because essentially this is going to look very, very different for everyone. But what we want to think about for a moment is just how often are you actually doing this? Because often when we go through stressful times, difficult times, all of these things are often the things that we then stop doing. They're the things that we let go of first because everything else needs to be done essentially. And you, as a person who is experiencing stress, pressure, overwhelm, need and deserve also this care and attention just as much as anyone else would. So just as a note of reflection, am I doing this weekly, daily, monthly, as and when I can? I can't remember last time I did it. Again, this isn't a tool to criticize ourselves, but just to reflect on the fact that maybe I could benefit from doing this more often. So like we said, self-compassion is not going to be easy. And it's worth it. There are lots of self-help resources online. There's therapy, there's journaling can help. We've sent some prompts for that, prompts for the compassionate letter writing, with prompts for all sorts of different circumstances. Understand that it's not your fault that you struggle with highly self-critical talk. And again, we also deserve better. So we like to end with this quote: the compassion links us to others, and we share a common humanity with a common wish to be happy and free from suffering and to live with grace. And absolutely every single one of us deserves that. So we can become the person that meets our needs. It increases the likelihood of us feeling stronger, better, calmer, more capable moving forward. But yeah, like I said, this was a very, very, very brief introduction to this topic. We do love it. It does feel very timely. Do you have a reflect for a moment and think about what can you do for yourself today, this week? If Christmas is going to be difficult, can you write yourself a letter to read Christmas morning, or anytime? It doesn't matter. Can you read a little something that to offer yourself some words of compassion, encouragement to read before you have to go and see these people that, can bring up some very tricky feelings? Can you read something after when you leave? Some words of comfort, reassurance: you did so well, you should be so proud. It doesn't matter, but just like I said, just bearing in mind it can be a very, very, very tricky time for many, many people. That is not our fault. And we might experience a hell of a lot of benefit from starting to be the person that offers us that care, compassion, understanding, grace, respect that we need and deserve. So yeah, just thank you all so, so much for being here. Thank you for making some time for yourselves. I love this topic. I love talking about it. I'm so grateful for you all being here and for your curiosity, for your engagement. I hope you have a very peaceful rest of the day and rest of the year. We will hopefully see some of you in the new year as well. We do all sorts of free webinars. Please, please, please do sign up to any and every that might be useful. Share them with anyone that might benefit. And yeah, just like I said, I'll try and post those resources again. Oh, it looks like it's worked. Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much. And thank you for helping one another in the chat. This is the solidarity and community we love. But yeah, just thank you so much for being here. Do take care of yourselves. I can see your hand up. I don't know if somebody has a question. Actually, it's not letting me allow people's microphones. I've only just realised. I do apologise. But yeah, if there's any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. I'll hang around for a few moments. But yeah, take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, have a very, very peaceful rest of the year, one and all, and hopefully see you again in the new year. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you for being here.